Warpdrive is a tool for building automations with zero effort. It is designed for individuals, and it can automate tasks that a human would manually do. In this demo, we will show how Warpdrive can be used by manual QA testers to turn each test they do into an automated QA test. Here's how it works. Let's say you're working on your app that your company builds, and you're doing 50 manual tests a day. Some of them get promoted to automated tests by somebody else. Instead, you could do your manual tests exactly as you normally do, but with Warpdrive's recorder running. It will convert that happy path into an automated test that you can augment with validations and get an automated test out in no time. Let's see it in action. Let's go ahead and log into Warpdrive's desktop application. It presents a dashboard for you to accumulate your workflows and organize them into folders. You got your recents, you got your favorites, you got your examples. You'll soon be able to create new folders based on test scenarios. We are interested in seeing what creating an automation test looks like. So let's go ahead and start the recorder. Imagine that you are part of the manual QA testing team at Salesforce, which is a feature-rich application. And the first test I will create is a very simple one that will go and search for a name in the contacts. And let's say that I have a sheet sitting around, this Excel sheet, on my desktop with names I routinely use for that test. So let's go back to Warpdrive and give it a starting URL. Let me name that workflow. I'm going to call it clipboard name to Salesforce contact search. Let me put the input name in the clipboard and then start recording by going and doing stuff in Salesforce. So I'm going to go all contacts. I'm going to paste that name. And then there we go. We get the sheet. We go back home and then we're done. Now let's go ahead and run this automation that was created over a different input value. I copied it to the clipboard and note how fast it went through and zoomed and did everything. We're going to do it again, but the most interesting part is the part that you don't see. Not even a second elapsed between the recording ending and it converting it into an automation. That is pretty cool. But a big part of QA automation is validations. That is ensuring that the app is behaving the way we expect it to behave. For that, Warpdrive provides a very intuitive non-programmer way to add those onto all steps of your warp. What you do is you run the warp in edit mode, and in that mode, it does not do the fast forward execution. Instead, it pauses at each step, and you have the option of adding an assertion check. So here on this page, I will add an assertion, for instance, to ensure that I'm on the sales dashboard of Salesforce. So I'm going to do a text equals, and then maybe add another one that the element that I'm clicking on is actually called contacts. I can maybe say it starts with, in case that is expected to change in the future. I'm going to go ahead to the next screen, add another assertion simply by clicking and then selecting a dropdown and then picking the element and then picking the comparison operator. I have string comparison operators and then I have integer comparison operators and then adding the right hand side of the assertion that I want. I'm going to go ahead and add one more for the sake of completeness and then call it done. Then I can continue stepping through the workflow as I was doing earlier. Instead of fast forwarding, it is now step by step. And now once I'm done with that, I can run the warp again. And this time around, it will be slightly slower on the pages that I added assertions on because it's checking and ensuring that everything is consistent with the way I had set it up. So we just saw the core ability to create a test from a recording and how to add validations. This is all you need to turn manual QA tests into automated tests. A part of using Warpdrive for testing is to run a whole bunch of automations in one go. So you could do that in a folder and you could trigger them off. But let's demonstrate what that might look like by examining a non-QA feature of Warpdrive, and that is by recording and running warps over data from Excel. So here I'm going into Excel and I will go ahead and start a recording after selecting a single row from the data sheet I have. So now what Warpdrive will do is it opens up a panel on the right top where it has the input data, and I can use that data to create the recording showing what I will do with that data. And in this case, I'm going in and creating a lead in Salesforce using that data. So I'm copy pasting the data from the panel, and I'm going to delete this lead just because I don't want to muck up my Salesforce instance. And then I'm going to go in and actually write an email to myself with some of that data. For example, I might want to put that in the subject field. And then I go ahead and draft an email to myself. I'm going to discard this because, again, I don't want to chunk up my inbox. And there we go. And I stop the recording. Now, when I go back to Excel, I have that new warp available to me. And what I can do now is sit back and select a set of data entries. And then now Warpdrive is going to iterate through that entire set one by one using new data each time and doing the operations that I had described. Notice that this could make sense in the QA testing case as well. Imagine you want to test your app with lots of data. You don't have to manually do it over and over again. You can just set the data from your input source and then let Warpdrive iterate. From another point of view, a technical point of view, about the internals of Warpdrive, what is happening here is the app is getting triggered from an external remote application, and in this particular case, Excel. It could as easily be triggered by your existing QA test management system, where you might have some parts of the test happen through that system, and then the rest is taken care of by Warpdrive. So let's recap what we just saw in this demo. One, we saw the ability to convert recordings of manual tests into automated runs. We saw how one can add validation to those tests. They currently include string and integer comparisons over elements and will get documented to more in the future. And three, we saw how Warpdrive exposes an interface that allows an external application, for example Excel, to trigger recordings and run over large amounts of data. And a final summary, Warpdrive builds automations with zero code within seconds by learning from screen recordings. We believe the zero code approach is much better in cost, accessibility, and time than alternatives. Warpdrive is not intended as a replacement to automation QA engineers. They do the complicated job of building reusable automation libraries and customizations. Warpdrive, on the other hand, augments them with tests from manual QA engineers to provide the more disposable automation tests that ensure nothing gets dropped on the floor after the manual tests are finished. Our program synthesis technology handles the job of coding the automation, so the manual tester can focus on their job of demonstrating what needs to be done rather than how. We hope this was helpful, and we look forward to hearing from you about your automation needs